Hello, this is Malorian, and this is the Orc Tactical Team. And whereas last time I talked about cavalry, today I'm going to be talking about Bretonnians in 8th and some of the different challenges that they're facing. Because whereas a lot of the thing with the cavalry that I talked about today really applies to them very heavily, there's still a few more little subtle nuances that you have to keep in mind with the Brets. So the first thing you got to think of is now, how am I going to start breaking these big blocks? I have all these big blocks. Brets, they're not like some other knights where, you can hit it and you can slowly work things down. They're really only good on the charge for the vast majority. So you have to really find a way to try and break these units if you can. But because of steadfast, that becomes very, very difficult. So what I think that almost every Bret army needs now is these big units of as big of a lance as you can take. And for Brets, the biggest ones you can take is 15 knights, which means 5 knights, 5 ranks. And that's either on your Knights Errant or Knights of the Realm. And because of cost, I'd say you want to be doing with these Knights Errant. So when I put first my list together, because I have the models, of course it depends on what models you have, but the very first thing I start with is 2 units of 15 Knights Errant. So these are my big hitters, and they're not only going to do a good amount of damage because that's a lot of knights, it's also going to hopefully take away that steadfast from the opponent so I can actually have a chance of breaking them. And a good thing is that even though you might see some big hordes that have more than 5 ranks to them, after all the damage your knights do, hopefully you can cut down a few at least and hopefully get them to the point where they can break. Now after you got those 2 big heavy hitters, I think Brets really have to specialize. You can't just have a bunch of units of 15 because then you wouldn't have that many units and you would be a little bit outmaneuvered, I'd think. So all of a sudden you need to have some ones geared to different things. One of the things that you want to think about first of all is what happens if I can't break a unit. Maybe they just have so many ranks that I can't take steadfast away. Or what happens if they're just plainly stubborn? What if you're fighting hammerers or now that there's an item out there that gives stubborn, you could be seeing this all the time. So I think that a big thing that Brets should be looking at now is their questing knights. Questing knights before, you didn't see them a lot because they only had the +1 strength. Now they have the +2 again, and I think they work very well where you can hit them as a lance and then reform after that to be 2 ranks. And since they can attack in the 2 ranks, you don't get the horses from the back, but who cares? You can still do a lot of heavy hitting. So if you pair that questing knight lance with the Knights Errant lance, you should be able to take out any large horde you really come against, or at least have a good chance to really do a lot of damage to it and have a chance to hopefully take it out eventually. And it's still going to be the point that some of these things you might not be able to take out, right? Let's say if you see something that has 300 Night Goblins in it. Now, if you see that as a Bret player, I wouldn't even attempt to try and defeat it. I'd just be attempting to try and lock it down. And so with that, I'd just be taking some lance of knights. Doesn't have to be overly big. I'm sure 9 or 12 can get the job done. Throw them into that unit. You're going to beat them in combat every round and just tie them down for that entire game. Don't waste your resources trying to break super hordes. Just go and try and smash the rest of the army. And in general, that's probably a main thing that Brets will have to do anyway, is really focusing probably on like one flank of the board. And because we're so fast, we can do it where we can, first turn, move up, and then just slam everything to one side. Another thing that we'll have to look at is some other utility lances. Some things like you can just take 6 knights, and they can be great for flankers, for disrupting units and taking away flanks. Like I said last time with the cavalry, there's nothing wrong with taking 5 Knights Errant and having them be War Machine Hunters. Another thing you can do is give one of them the Flaming Banner so that you can have one Lance Knights being specifically just to go and take out anything that has regen or that is flammable. So you can really specialize these, and I think that's something that's really going to happen. Now, one nice thing that Brets have that a lot of armies don't have is the trebuchet. Now, back in 7th, I hated the trebuchet. Anything that's shooting these big templates that, ignore armor that are going to be around where your knights are charging, that they scatter, I don't think that's a really good thing to have. However, now they're just so much more powerful in 8th. They get such a deal on them because most other stone throwers have gone down to strength 3, whereas the Bret one is still strength 5. So at 90 points, that thing is just a steal. So it might be worth it if you have some extra points, and if you're not going purely knight heavy, to be throwing a 1 or 2 in the back just to try and break things down. You also, I think, because of the watchtower, you can't be going pure knights if you want to be very competitive. You need to have something that can go and hold that watchtower, and it's probably just going to be either 20 men-at-arms or 20 archers, whatever one you want, just something that can go in there and hold it. I mean, your knights can charge in there and try and do some damage, but because they have to leave after anyway, they can't really hold it. So your only really chance, if you're going all knight heavy, was to kill try and first knock them out, which would be insanely difficult, and then just try and keep everything away from it. Of course, that's only 1 in 6 games, but it's something you have to plan ahead for. As far as peasants go in general in 8th for Bretonnians, I've seen some people have some success with them, but I think you have to be very careful with them, because really, men-at-arms are still insanely weak. You can't go with shields anymore with them, so it's either going to be the halberds or the spears. I think a lot of people are doing halberds. But anyway, for 5 points, it seems like, okay, if I take a lot of these halberd guys, they can do alright. But when they're getting attacked, because they're only weapon skill 2, a lot of times they're getting hit on a 3+, they're getting wounded easily, they have almost no save, and they're dying in droves. So for them to win in combat is pretty much non-existent. This won't happen, and the only way that you're going to see men-at-arms win is just be able to slowly grind something down, just with a lot of attacks, and eventually, finally in 4 or 5 rounds of combat, we're able to kill enough to actually make a difference. However, to last that long, you're going to have to take a lot of men-at-arms. So when you're starting to look at these large blocks, I just don't know if it's really worth it. You might just want to put a lot of these things into getting more knights instead and trying to do more damage that way, so you can actually hit hard. And of course, a lot of the times as well, maybe you're having these knights or these men-at-arms just to hold something down, and then the knights come in and that's your big ploy, is that you're going to tie them down and then counter with knights. Well, still, just like in 7th, that takes time to set up, and while you're getting into position with those men-at-arms, they're blasting your knights, and it can get to the point where by the time they charge in, they're not even going to do enough damage to matter. So, personally, I go as for as many knights as possible, and that's probably something you want to think of as well. There's another one there, the Grail Reliquae. Because of how there's ways to get stubborn without being stubborn anymore, it's not as good as it used to be. But the Grail Reliquae actually could be a good thing to use, either for, as I said, if you're crushing one side and just want to be blocking off the other, that's something there you can be just throwing in where you don't have to worry about how many ranks you have, it's always going to be stubborn. Or even just something to be throwing into the watchtower. The stubborn doesn't matter as much there, because in the watchtower you automatically have the stubborn. However, with their blessing, they're a little bit more resilient than the men-at-arms, and of course more resilient than the archers. So something you might want to think about them. Grail Knights can still be really good. I mean, you need to kill a lot sometimes in order to take away that steadfast, so as long as you have a lot of knights to take away the priority, I think they're still a viable choice. Because of how killy Pegasus Knights are, I think they can still do very well. They're not going to be breaking blocks on their own, but at least they can be something, like I said, with the questing Knights, where they can join in to try and give off more kills. Or they can be going after war machines, or they can even do very well at going after characters. Take 4 of them, 2 in the front, 2 in the back. Whenever you hit, all of them get to attack. So that's something that can be really good. The only problem with them and their character killers is, of course, for Brets, every single unit has to take a unit champ, so they could always challenge to mess up things if they really wanted to, but it's just some tactics that are out there. So I don't want to be rambling on too much, but the main things I want to get across here with Brets in 8th as opposed to most other cavalry is that you're really going to have to try and work the system, really specialize, really watch. Just like before, I don't think you should be wasting too many points and getting too many characters, getting too many peasants. I still think knights are their real strength. You can still mix some in. You'll want some for the watchtower. You might want some trebuchets. But in the end, just make sure you have some big, huge lances that take away those to hopefully take away steadfast, and then the rest being specialized for whatever meta game you usually face. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time. Bye.